My parents told my younger brother he should just take my house, said it made sense since I don't have a family of my own. I'm a single guy, early 30s. My brother, who's 28, already has 4 kids running around. He became a dad at 23, had another baby a year later, then one more 2 years after that, and the newest addition came just a couple months ago. His wife and I, well, we've never really gotten along. She's got this habit of trying to push my buttons, always acting like she's better than me, and the second I snap back, she flips into full drama mode, crying and playing the victim like she's on a soap opera. She can turn on the waterworks like it's nothing and fool just about anyone into taking her side. My parents and my brother are totally smitten with her even though they know exactly how she is, they just choose to overlook it. I'll admit she's attractive, but her attitude is so off-putting I couldn't be into her even if I tried. She also flat out refuses to get a job. She's got a college degree and everything, and my mom even babysits the kids full-time, but still, she won't work. So they're completely living off my brother's income. Because of that, they can't afford their own place and have to live in my parents' house. Privacy is pretty much non-existent with all of them stuffed into that old 3-bedroom house built back in the 60s. Growing up, it was clear my little brother was the favorite. There's only a 3-year age gap between us, but he always acted like he was better than me. If I ever tried to defend myself or push back when he was being a jerk, I got punished hard for it. It was obvious my parents favored him. He got the best of everything unless someone from the family pointed it out. That happened more than once, which I think is why my parents decided to move us about 150 miles away. They didn't want other relatives seeing how unfair things were. After that, we mostly only saw extended family on holidays since it was a 3-hour drive. My brother got physically aggressive with me more than a few times. He even flirted nonstop with my first girlfriend until she dumped me, and he'd laugh anytime something bad happened to me. My parents' response? Tough luck. They just tell me to deal with it. The only time they treated me equally was when there were people around they wanted to impress. I'll admit it was kind of funny watching them force a smile and act like they were fair on birthdays and Christmas just because nosy relatives were around. Those same relatives loved gossip, so my parents worked hard to cover up what was really happening at home. They'd even threatened to take all my stuff if I dared speak up. When I turned 18 and moved out, my parents basically celebrated. They didn't have to pretend anymore, didn't have to take care of me. I wasn't even done with high school when I left, I just couldn't take living there anymore. Couch surfing was a step up, honestly. Since then, I've kept my distance. We barely talk. They didn't bother showing up to my high school graduation, but I didn't lose any sleep over it. From that point on, the only times I'd see them were during the holidays, just like everyone else in the family. When the pandemic hit in 2020, things got rough. I lost my job, and since my roommate also lost his, we couldn't afford to renew the lease on our condo. It was a rented 2-bedroom place, and I really loved living there. But once my roommate dipped out early to move in with family, I had no choice. I had to sell off almost everything I owned because I was staring down homelessness and had to downsize fast. Looking back, I probably shouldn't have been living somewhere that expensive in the first place. I liked the lifestyle, but once things went south, I realized I should have been smarter and saved more. Still, I wasn't totally out of options. I've always had a thing for trucks, so I owned one already. I found this $1,000 camper in decent shape and mounted it onto my truck, figuring I'd crash in it for a little while until I got back on my feet. That temporary solution ended up lasting a whole lot longer than I expected. My original plan was to park the camper at my parents' place for a bit, figured it made sense, since my brother and his crew were still living there too. But when I asked, my parents basically told me there wasn't any room and that they didn't want me there anyway. We hadn't exactly been on great terms the past 10 years. They said they'd only let me park there if I paid them rent, almost the same as what an actual apartment costs around here. That was ridiculous. I didn't have a job and I was trying to stretch my unemployment as far as possible until I could find work again. Paying the kind of money just to park a camper? I may as well have just gotten an apartment. They said the camper was ugly and told me to beat it when I didn't agree to their rent demands. They even laughed about me having to live in it. My brother joined right in with the mocking, calling me a homeless bum like it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. That first night with nowhere else to go, I parked in some store parking lot and tried to get some sleep. I was terrified the whole time. Kept thinking someone might try to break in. Needless to say, I didn't get much rest. I had nowhere else to turn. The few relatives I had who owned houses lived too far away, and all my friends were apartment folks. Plus, I didn't want to leave the area. I was still attached to the place. I had my mail forwarded to a friend's apartment, which was the only way I could even get mail anymore. Finding somewhere safe and steady to park was a challenge on its own. I spent a lot of time hunting for a job similar to the one I'd lost. That meant months of bouncing around, living this weird, nomadic camper life. During that time, I dealt with all sorts of crap. People begging for money, drug addicts wandering around, and others straight up demanding I move because they thought my camper was an eyesore. One guy even claimed he was part of an HOA and tried to chase me off, even though I wasn't even parked on a street with any houses nearby. When I asked the guy what HOA he was supposedly with, he got real aggressive, started yelling and throwing threats my way. I ended up moving the camper just to avoid any drama. To keep my camper powered, I figured out how to run a long extension cord and plug in wherever I could find an outlet. Usually, that meant quietly hooking up to an exterior plug on some random building while parked nearby. Yeah, I know that's not exactly upstanding behavior, but I needed electricity to keep my fridge running, especially for keeping food from spoiling. I had a small solar charger that worked okay for my phone, but that was about it. No generator either. Those things are loud, suck down gas, and aren't exactly subtle. So I did what I had to do. After months of living that way, bouncing around, dodging trouble, I finally landed a new job. The catch? I had to move to the next city over to find something that wasn't retail. I worked retail back in college and swore I'd never go back. And while I came close to breaking that promise out of desperation, I was still pulling in unemployment. But I didn't want to wait until that ran out. Plus, I was going stir-crazy. There's only so much you can do when you're living out of a camper. I'd spend my days reading, watching movies on a little portable DVD player, and cycling between my phone and laptop to pass the time. I kept detailed notes of where I could safely park and which public restrooms were clean enough to use. Honestly, I used to wish we had public bathhouses here in the US like they do in Japan. That would have made things a whole lot easier. Once I started the new job, I basically lived behind the building in this old, forgotten part of the lot where nobody parked anymore. It was out by the warehouse, former employee parking from way back. Nobody seemed to care it was there. Funny enough, the owner of the company, who was also my boss, was cool with it. He liked that I was always nearby and ready to work any shift, so long as I got some sleep in. He even let me take the camper off the truck and set it up in one of the back spaces so I could drive around without hauling it. Not entirely sure if it was legal, but no one ever gave us trouble for it. I hardly had any issues with trespassers either, just a few here and there, and the security guards would escort them out without much fuss. I was basically on call every day, working like crazy. My boss let me hook up to the building's power and water, and in return I worked for free every Sunday. Those were slow days anyway, just the janitor and security around. For showers, I'd either head over to a friend's place or hit the local gym. The camper didn't have a shower, just a portable toilet, which I avoided using unless I absolutely had to. Emptying that thing was as gross as it sounds, so I preferred using public restrooms whenever I could. They even gave me a key to the warehouse, so I had access to the bathroom anytime I needed it. I got real friendly with the night security guy, too. He's actually become one of my closest friends. During winter, I kept warm with a little electric heater, which worked fine. Summer, though? That was brutal. No built-in AC in the camper, so I bought a used portable unit to survive the heat. I clocked a ton of overtime, and along the way, picked up some solid new skills just by working side by side with experienced folks. Around mid-year, I got promoted to supervisor and finally started making a real salary, better than the job I had before the pandemic hit. That's when I made up my mind. I wanted a house. After losing that condo, I knew I couldn't keep living life on the edge. I needed something stable, somewhere I could call mine for the long haul. So I started house hunting and found a 3-bedroom manufactured home just 2 miles from my job. Had a small yard, nothing fancy, but it felt perfect. I ended up getting it for $10,000 under the asking price. Somehow. I drained most of my savings for the down payment and got approved for a mortgage. For the first time in years, I had a place to call home again. There was just enough space behind the house to back in my truck and drop the camper in the yard. So I set it up back there like a bonus building, just in case I ever wanted to use it again. Once I got fully moved in and everything was in place, I made the mistake of posting about it on Facebook. I was proud, you know? Wanted to share the win. That's when things really started going sideways. A few weeks later, my parents, my brother, his wife, and their kids all showed up at my house out of the blue. I hadn't given them my address. No one had visited me before, so I have no idea how they figured out where I lived. None of my friends confessed to leaking it, and I can't help but wonder if they followed me from work or something. Honestly, I wouldn't put it past them. When I opened the door, they all pushed their way in like they were on some sort of guided house tour. Didn't even wait to be invited. They started snooping around like it was theirs, acting way too comfortable. Tara, my brother's wife, had this creepy little smirk on her face the whole time. At first, I didn't know what it meant, but once I found out, it lit a fire in me like I'd just been kicked by a bull with a grudge. My parents kept going on about how much space I had now, how it was too much for a single guy with no wife or kids. My brother started dropping hints about how my place was way roomier than our parents' house. And on top of that, he said my place was closer to his job. The red flags were practically waving in my face. Eventually, Mark, my brother, asked if we could talk privately. Right after that, everyone else conveniently stepped out onto the porch. That's when it hit me they'd planned this. Mark started saying the house was too much for just one person and that he and his growing family needed more room, especially since Tara was pregnant again with baby number 4. Then he hit me with it. He thought it'd be a great idea if they moved into my house. Said I already had the camper so I could just live out back while they took over the inside. And get this, not once did he even mention rent. Not a single word about contributing anything. Mark's got a decent job too, so it's not like they're scraping by. But no, he just assumed I'd let them move in for free. He even started talking about making changes around the house, curfews, schedules, rules. Said I wouldn't be allowed to just walk in whenever I wanted without giving them a heads up. If it had been anyone else saying this, I'd think they were out of their damn mind. But this was Mark, and he's been living in his own little fantasy world ever since our parents made him believe he was the golden child. I tried to speak up, tried to get a word in, but he just kept bulldozing right over me, like my opinion didn't matter at all. There was absolutely no chance I was going to rent out my house, or even a single room in it, to him. Maybe I'd consider renting to someone else just to make the mortgage easier on me, but definitely not to him or his obnoxious wife. I've seen stories just like this all over the internet. Never in a million years did I think I'd be in one myself. It always felt too ridiculous to be real. But looking at my parents, my brother, and Tara, yeah, they check every box for being a bunch of entitled narcissists. So I grabbed my phone and quietly hit the record button. Kept it in my hand. Mark either didn't notice or didn't care. I couldn't really tell. He just kept rambling, throwing his arms around while listing off all the reasons he needed my house. Then, like he'd already closed the deal, he held out his hand like we were about to seal it with a handshake. That's when I finally grew a spine and told him, plain and loud, hell no. I said it so firmly that Mark actually took a step back, caught off guard. I almost never raised my voice at him growing up. We weren't allowed to, or else our parents would come down on me hard. But this wasn't their place. This was mine. And in my house, I get to stand tall. I stood up and told him flat out that my home wasn't up for grabs, and no amount of begging or pretending was going to change that. I didn't buy this house for them. I bought it for me. Not my fault he keeps popping out more kids and still can't afford to move out of our parents' place. Then Mark stepped in close, just inches from my face, and told me I didn't deserve the house. He said his family needed somewhere better to live. I just laughed in his face and called BS. I worked my ass off to get this house. Of course I deserved it. That's when Mark started yelling about how I didn't have a wife or kids, so I didn't need all the space and I should just give it to him. I told him, I'm not giving you anything. And it's not like he even offered to pay rent. If I let him move in, I'd be stuck paying the full mortgage while getting pushed out of my own home. Then he said he shouldn't have to pay anything because his family comes first. Then he had the nerve to say our parents told him I was going to let him move in. Like it was some kind of final decision. I shouted back that just because they said something doesn't mean it's law. They don't get to hand over my house to him like it's theirs. And right on cue, my parents and Tara came barging back through the front door like they owned the place. They surrounded me, trying to pressure me into caving. The argument got loud and messy. Honestly, the only part that really stuck with me was how many times I heard, just do it for Mark. In the middle of all that chaos, I told them straight they don't get to make decisions about my life or my house. I told them all to get out or I'd call the police. Tara was screaming louder than everyone else, ranting about how she was pregnant again. Like that was supposed to mean something to me. I never did anything to her, but she sure acted like she was entitled to take whatever she wanted from me. I don't owe her or her growing family a damn thing. Then I called her a stuck-up bitch who never once respected me. Told her I didn't care what she thought or how many kids she popped out. I wasn't about to feel sorry for her. She sure didn't take that well, lost it and came at me. Landed a solid hit to my face before my brother had to physically hold her back. She was thrashing and screaming, begging him to let her go so she could scratch my eyes out. Meanwhile, my phone had caught nearly the whole thing on video. So I held it up and warned them all that I was calling the cops if they didn't leave right now. That's when my parents told Mark it was time to go. As they turned to leave, my mother told me I had 1 week to come to my senses. I told her not to waste her time, I wasn't changing my mind. Then I turned to Tara and let her know the entire incident was recorded. If she tried anything, I'd press charges for assault. She screamed at me one last time and stormed out, crying with her face in her hands. My mother was the last out the door. She gave me one final guilt trip, said I better do this for Mark and Tara. All I said back was, I'm not doing it. After kicking out my parents, my brother, and Tara for trying to strong-arm me into handing over my house, I didn't waste any time. I jumped on social media and posted the full story for the rest of the family to see. It spread quick. You won't find the post now because I took it down and locked my profile, but it did the job when it needed to. I knew that as soon as they got home, they'd try to twist the story and make me out to be the bad guy. And I was right. But I had about an hour's head start and video proof to back everything up. Getting out in front of it worked. A good chunk of the family took my side right off the bat. I'm sure my parents, Mark, and Tara were gearing up to write their own version of events, but once they saw what I posted, they didn't even bother trying to lie much. They still had a few people backing them up, some of those classic flying monkeys. But not many. Most of the family already knew how entitled they were, so none of this really shocked anyone. There was one person who actually called me. Still have no idea who they were, but they tore into me, ranting about how I was a terrible brother and needed to make room for a real family man. I didn't argue. Just hung up and blocked the number. That was the end of that. A week went by. And like clockwork, my parents showed up on my porch with Mark, just like they said they would in their little ultimatum. They rang the doorbell nonstop and pounded on the door like they were about to break it down. I cracked it open just a bit. Right away, they tried to force their way in again. But I'd installed a couple latch chains by then, and I was also bracing the door with my body. They weren't getting in. My dad and Mark started barking at me to let them in, but I told them I was recording everything and would call the cops if they didn't back off. That got my mom to cool things down a bit. She softened her voice and, in the fakest sweet tone you can imagine, asked if I was ready to let Mark move in. I told all of them, without hesitation, to fuck off and never come back. My mom turned on the waterworks and asked why I couldn't just do this one thing for Mark. After all, he's my dear brother. I couldn't help but laugh before I flat out told her I don't love him like a brother. Not after the way he's treated me like garbage for years and how they just stood by and let it happen. Hell, they encouraged it. They were awful parents. And Mark? He was a lousy brother. I told them straight up, get out of my house or I'm calling the cops, no discussion. Surprisingly, they didn't put up much of a fight. My mom was bawling like she was on stage, and the rest just glared at me like I'd kicked a puppy. Honestly, the way they left so easily felt suspicious, like something was off. I thought that was the end of the madness. But clearly, I underestimated just how stupid their next move would be. Later that same week, on Friday evening, I pulled into my driveway and spotted a moving truck parked next to Mark's minivan. That's when I saw them, Mark and his family, hauling boxes into my house like they owned the place. Mark just gave me the smug, shit-eating grin and waved like we were old pals. I was livid. I told them all to stop immediately. But Tara looked me dead in the eye, smirked, and said it didn't matter what I thought, they were moving in. Then, with the fakest smile you've ever seen, she tilted her head, puckered her lips, and told me it was fine. Because Mommy said so, she added in this condescending little sing-song voice. And you should always listen to what Mommy says. Just hearing that made my blood boil. Her smug little face didn't help. I stormed into my truck and locked the doors, dialing the cops right away. The second they realized what I was doing, Tara started banging on my window and yelling at me. She shrieked that I couldn't do this to her, that she and Mark needed the house. Then she cried, why can't you just do this for Mark? I shouted back, screw Mark. This is my house. Not his. That's when she lost it and threatened to key the side of my truck if I didn't hang up. Lucky for me, the window was cracked open just enough that the 911 operator caught every word. I warned Tara that if she so much as scratched my truck, I'd sue her. Thankfully, she backed off before doing anything stupid. When the cops showed up, Mark and Tara had barricaded themselves and their kids inside my house. I explained everything to the officers, showed them my ID with the correct address, and walked them up to the front door, only to find they'd swapped the lock. The old one was just lying there on the porch, center drilled out. And wouldn't you know it, the drill they used was still right there too, along with a full Harbor Freight drill bit set. I pointed it all out to the officers and filled them in on everything that had led up to this. Apparently, Mark had called our parents over while I was busy talking to the cops because they rolled up soon after. And of course, the first thing out of their mouths was a lie that I'd agreed to rent the house to Mark and his family. I told the officers that was a flat-out lie and could be proven easily. Right then, Mark and Tara finally came out of the house, smug as ever, holding what they claimed was a rental agreement. They looked so sure of themselves, like they'd pulled some genius move. But the so-called contract didn't even have my real signature. There was a signature, sure, but it was a joke. It didn't look anything like my handwriting. Honestly, I don't think any of them have ever even seen my signature before. Total amateur hour. I told them all straight, what they did was fraud, plain and simple. And if the police decided to look into it, it wouldn't take long to figure that out. I reminded Mark that getting arrested wouldn't just land him in court, it could cost him his job. And considering that's his only way to support his family, it'd be a real dumb move. I also made it clear that if anything of mine was stolen, damaged, or went missing, I'd lawyer up and go after every last one of them. And for good measure? I said I'd be calling CPS too. Mark went pale as a ghost. But my mom? She doubled down. Said I should stop being so selfish and just move into the camper so Mark's family could finally have a proper home. I snapped and told her if she thought it was such a great idea, she could be the one to move into a damn camper and give her house to Mark. The cops had to pull her back at that point, and I told them again, loudly and clearly, that I wanted every last one of them off my property or I'd press charges. I reminded them they'd drilled out my lock, forged documents, and that I had video proof of Tara attacking me. All of those were felonies, and I wasn't bluffing when I said I'd ruin their lives over this if they didn't back off. The only reason I hadn't already was because I didn't want to drag Mark's kids through that mess. But I warned them they had exactly one chance to get out peacefully. I think that's the moment reality finally smacked my parents in the face. My mom threw in the towel and said she'd put a stop to it. She pulled Tara aside and whispered something to her while my dad talked to Mark. Then Tara started wailing like a banshee, tearing up the fake lease and throwing the pieces in the air like confetti until one of the officers calmly told her to pick them up or get a littering fine. The look on those cops' faces? Pure, we do not get paid enough for this. Mark had to tell his kids to start loading the moving truck back up. The younger ones were sniffling and the oldest was full-on sobbing because he wouldn't get his own room anymore. Tara and Mark tried to pull one last pathetic stunt. They huddled their kids together for a sad little performance like they were auditioning for a pity commercial. I swear, it was like they'd rehearsed it. The kids had matching teary faces, lips trembling like they were in sync. Tara kept rubbing her pregnant belly like it was some kind of sympathy magnet, and Mark gave me this ridiculous, kicked puppy look as he begged, "Please don't do this. We have to live here," Mark insisted, his voice getting all dramatic like I was sentencing them to life on the streets. But I didn't budge. I looked him right in the eye and told him to keep packing. That just made things worse. All the kids, plus Tara, cranked up the crying like someone had hit a switch. It was pure chaos, tears, sobbing, dramatic wailing, the whole 9 yards. Mark finally snapped and yelled, "Are you proud of yourself? You're kicking your own family out because you're too selfish to help." That actually made me laugh. Not just a chuckle, I laughed like I'd lost my damn mind. Then I shot back, "This isn't sharing, Mark. You're taking. And no amount of crying is gonna change the fact that you're not my brother anymore. To me, he's just some entitled jerk who still thinks he can grab whatever he wants from me, just like he did when we were kids." Mark completely lost it, started dropping F-bombs left and right until one of the officers stepped in and told him to knock it off or they'd cuff him on the spot, whether I pressed charges or not. That shut him up real quick. He clammed up, lips pulled tight, looking like he couldn't decide if he was scared or ready to explode. I asked the officers if they could hang around until all of them, my parents, Mark, and Tara, were off my property. The cops said they weren't going anywhere until it was all handled. Not long after, 2 more officers showed up. Suddenly there were 4 cops on my lawn, and that seemed to light a fire under my parents. I demanded Mark hand over the keys to the new lock he'd installed. He didn't want to. At first, he acted like he might give them to me, then tossed them down the street and right into a storm drain. Go fetch, he sneered. One of the officers scolded him like a bratty kid and made him go get the keys. So Mark had to crouch down, lift the grate, and fish around in the muck to get them back. He was covered in dirt by the time he yanked them out, then slammed them into my hand without a word. I looked them all in the eye and told them flat out to leave and never show their faces here again. My mom, always the drama queen, said I was being disowned like that was supposed to mean something to me. I just laughed and said, oh no, guess that means I'll miss out on all those fun family holidays where I get treated like garbage while you all cater to Mark. I told them how obvious it's always been that Mark's their golden child, and that the way they treated me growing up was so bad if he ever needed an organ I wouldn't give him anything. I reminded them how they always told me to just suck it up whenever I was hurt or left out. So I told them to do the same. They didn't know what to say. My mom looked stunned, my dad looked like he wanted to hit me, and Mark just stood there holding his kids, looking completely defeated. Tara, meanwhile, was in the front yard throwing a tantrum like a toddler who didn't get their way. Eventually, they gave up the act and started passing boxes out the door, one by one. Luckily, nothing had been unpacked yet, so it went fast. But the whole time, my mom wouldn't quit trying to guilt-trip me. It's not too late, she kept saying over and over. You could still do this for Mark. She kept trying to sweeten the deal, first offering rent, then suggesting I move back in with them so Mark could rent my place and I wouldn't have to share it. I cut her off and told her to shut it and keep packing. I didn't want their money. I didn't want Mark in my house. And I damn sure didn't want to move back in with the people who made my childhood miserable. Trying to make a deal with my parents? That'd be like shaking hands with the devil. No thanks. Tara lost it again when she heard that. She dropped a box, flopped down in the yard, and threw herself a full-blown pity party. She just sat there, sulking, arms crossed, looking like a toddler who'd been told to share a toy. She didn't even bother getting up when it was time to go. Just sat in the grass looking bitter and miserable while everyone else loaded the truck. Once they finally got everything out, I gave my parents one final piece of my mind. With 4 police officers standing there, they couldn't interrupt or twist it around like they always used to. I laid it all out. Every crappy thing they ever did. I reminded them how, when I was down on my luck and homeless, they wouldn't even let me park my camper in their driveway unless I paid them more than I could afford. Meanwhile, they were ready to hand my house over to Mark for free. I brought up how Mark and Tara used to call me a bum, and they just laughed right along. So I looked them straight in the eye and asked, well, who's the bum now? Those cops gave them some serious side-eye after hearing all that. I turned back to my parents and asked what I'd ever done, aside from being born, to deserve the way they've treated me. And now that I've finally made something of myself, they want to strip it all away and hand it over to their favorite. I bought this house with money I earned. Not theirs. I don't owe them a thing. And I'm sure as hell not asking for anything from them ever again. Because to them I've only ever been 2 things, someone to step on or someone to drain for cash. Nothing more. They didn't even try to respond. Just stood there with their mouths hanging open like fish flopping on the dock. So I kept going. Asked them how on earth they could possibly believe they were good parents after all the crap they pulled. My dad turned bright red, though this time it wasn't from anger, it was embarrassment. My mom was crying again, saying she was a terrible person. I told her she was right. She is. So is Dad. So is Mark. Hell, all of them are. And if there's any justice after this life, they'll get what's coming to them. But here's the thing, if I'd said all of this in private, they'd have just gotten mad, twisted my words, and acted like I was the bad guy. That's what they've always done. Denial's become their whole personality at this point. My mom ended up burying her face in my dad's jacket, crying like the victim. But this time, the truth was out and there were witnesses to it all. My dad looked more defeated than I'd ever seen him. Like all the wind had finally been knocked out of him. Mark and his family completely avoided me as they loaded everything back into the moving truck. I kept a sharp eye on things just to make sure nothing of mine went missing. Not that I had much furniture yet, but I wasn't about to let them take even a single spoon. Once everything was packed up, they all climbed back into their cars. Tara stood there for a minute, glaring at me like she wanted to hex me or something until Mark finally got her to drag herself back into the minivan and drive off. The second they were gone, I hopped online and shared what had happened. And for the first time ever, my parents didn't even try to spin it. Too embarrassed, I guess. Before, some relatives were split over everything. But after this incident, it was a landslide. Practically the whole family swung over to my side. The "we did it for Mark" excuse? Nobody was buying it anymore. Even people I thought would stay neutral, or worse, side with my parents, ended up backing me. including the former monkeys as I used to call them. I guess even they'd had enough of the favoritism, the manipulation, and the constant drama. Sometime after all this blew over, I decided to host half the family for Christmas Eve at my new house. My parents weren't invited. Obviously. Funny enough, Mark and Tara hadn't blocked me on social media. And that's how I saw that Tara had her fourth baby in early November. Yep, 4 kids now. They're still living with my parents. And I'm pretty sure they knew I was watching because Tara started posting all these whiny, passive-aggressive messages every couple of weeks. Stuff like how cramped the house was. How she needed her own space. How she wished she had somewhere to raise the baby in peace. It was all pretty thinly veiled, like she was hoping to guilt me into caving. And honestly, I'm sure it's driving my parents up the wall. 3 loud kids, a newborn, Tara's mental state unraveling, and Mark just being Mark. I wouldn't be surprised if my parents are now dreaming of moving into a camper in their own backyard just to escape the noise. Maybe they should give Mark their house and live out back. You know, really do it for Mark. To those who said I should have had my brother and Tara arrested, that the only reason I didn't was because their parents, maybe you're right. Their kids need them. And yeah, if Mark had been arrested, he might have lost his job and then the whole family would have gone under. Tara just had a baby. They didn't need jail time. But here's the thing, you don't need to file a police report to get revenge. The police helped, sure. But I got my payback without anyone ending up in cuffs. Would I be that merciful again? Probably not. And they know that. I waited until after New Year's to make a proper account and share everything publicly just in case anything else happened. Spoiler alert, it did. Like I said earlier, Tara kept making those passive-aggressive posts all over social media, especially after baby number 4 was born. It was the same script on repeat, just with slightly fancier wording every time. The house is too small. She needs her own place. She's exhausted. Yada yada yada. And yeah, I know I sound cold. But live through the crap I've dealt with and you'd be ready to bust out a tiny violin and start playing too. They're that bad. So January rolls around and I host the Christmas Eve party I mentioned earlier. Half the family showed up even though it was a long 3 to 4 hour drive for most of them. They still came. Because they wanted to show support. And honestly, it meant the world to me. People kept coming up to tell me how proud they were. How much I'd overcome. How sorry they were for not seeing it all sooner. I even got asked why I didn't just take my camper and move back closer to them instead of living borderline homeless for so long. I had to sheepishly admit that I was just really attached to this area. Most of the best work opportunities in my field are around here and I didn't want to start from scratch again. I wanted to build something for myself. They understood. From there, it turned into one of the best Christmas Eves I've had in years. People brought food, drinks, gifts, even CDs. One of my uncles brought a Ray Charles Christmas album and let me tell you, the man sings holiday music like nobody else. It was amazing. For a few hours I actually let myself breathe. Forget all the old wounds and just enjoy the moment. But of course, nothing with my family ever stays peaceful for long. About 2 hours in, guess who showed up? Yep. My parents, Mark and Tara walked right in. No knock. No warning. Just barged through the front door like they were supposed to be there. I stopped the music, turned to them and told them to leave immediately. They tried to play it off like everything was fine. We brought gifts, they said, smiling like nothing had happened. Before I could even reply, one of my uncles jumped up, my mother's brother, mind you, and shouted at them. Told them flat out that they didn't deserve to be in my home or my life after what they tried to pull. And then several other relatives backed him up. It was powerful. My uncle used to adore my mom. But once he found out about all the crap they'd put me through, that relationship changed. My grandparents, who aren't exactly spring chickens anymore, stepped in next. They told my parents right in front of everyone that if they ever wanted to make amends with me, it was way too soon. That they'd never been more disappointed in them. They said the favoritism they'd been hiding for years wasn't hidden anymore and no one was fooled. Then they turned to Mark and Tara and said they were sick of the whining and attention-seeking Tara kept doing online. That it was time to accept reality. My house wasn't theirs. And it never would be. Tara, of course, reverted to her usual pity party routine, sobbing about how she should be the one living here, not me. She threw herself into a chair and whined that it wasn't fair I had this house all to myself while she had 4 kids who needed more space. And she just wanted to feel like a real mom in a home she could be proud of. I'll admit I got petty. Loudly, I said she sucks as a mother anyway. My mom does most of the parenting while Tara spends her days lounging, drinking, scrolling on her phone, or spending every dollar Mark earns. And then she has the audacity to complain about her life like it's someone else's fault. Yeah, I also may have joked that I was surprised her baby wasn't getting tipsy off her breast milk with how much she drinks. Bit too far, maybe. I caught a few stares. Tara fired back, demanding to know if I was calling her a bad mom. I just told her the evidence speaks for itself. And if she wanted to afford moving out of my parents' house one day, maybe she could dust off that college degree, find a job, and start saving some money. My mom's already raising her kids, what's her excuse? That's when her 7-year-old stormed over and started kicking and screaming at me for yelling at his mom. Apparently, Tara told him I was the bad guy who made her cry and wouldn't let them live here. Just, wow. Mark yanked the kid away, but it didn't matter. The rest of the family jumped back in. It was like a group intervention against Mark and Tara. She was crying. The baby was crying. The kids were crying. Honestly, even Mark looked like he was about to burst into tears. He just collapsed onto the ottoman by the front door, looking absolutely wrecked. Couldn't look anyone in the eye. Couldn't say a single word to me. Not with a whole room full of people ready to rip into him if he opened his mouth and tried to play the golden child card again. If the others hadn't been there, I have no doubt he would have tried to start ordering me around again, just like the last time. But this time? Nah. His reputation was done. My parents' reputations were done. Everyone saw through the act now. The masks were off, and no one was falling for it anymore. Eventually, my parents, Mark, and Tara all left in shame. And just like that, the party kicked back into gear. We didn't talk about what had just happened. It was one of those unspoken agreements. Everyone was already a little tipsy, so most of them just stayed the night. Some slept in the house. Some stayed in the camper, which actually made a great little guest house. They'd all wanted a tour of it earlier and were stunned that I'd lived in it for almost 2 years. I got a bunch of questions: what it was like in summer, in winter, how I made it work. Honestly, it felt good to talk about it. To see people appreciate the resilience it took. Christmas morning, I was the first one up. I had fresh coffee going and ibuprofen ready for those who were nursing a hangover from the spiked eggnog. People kept telling me I was a way better host than my parents ever were, and we all agreed to do it again next year. After that, Tara finally chilled out with the passive-aggressive social media posts. She even deleted the old ones. But not long after the new year, she put up one last gem, saying she tried to convince my parents to get a camper like I had so she and Mark could take over the entire house. Yeah, you read that right. Basically, she wanted my parents to move into a camper in their own backyard so her family could have the house to themselves. Unsurprisingly, my parents shut that idea down hard. Word is they were not gentle about it. Even they're not that self-sacrificing, not when it comes to giving up their master bedroom. The post was gone after a couple of days. And since then? Radio silence. Tara's hardly posted anything. I guess she finally realized there's no point in complaining when no one's listening anymore. And Mark? He still can't afford to move his family out on his salary alone. If they end up popping out baby number 5 in the next few years, honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised. As for me? Life's been peaceful. I've started inviting friends over for poker nights. I suck at poker, can't remember the hands, can't bluff to save my life. But who cares? We drink beer, eat junk food, and act like merry idiots for a night. Last time, we loaded up on burgers from McDonald's, cracked open some beers, and just had it at 4 grown men, 0 responsibilities for one evening, getting buzzed and laughing like we were back in college. Maybe this summer I'll finally try dating again. I'm not getting any younger, and it'd be nice to have someone to share this next chapter with. Fingers crossed, right? My camper just sits idle in the yard now. But sometimes I still go out there. Just to sit. Reflect. I lived in that thing for 2 years. It's kind of like a second home now. Maybe someday I'll use it for what it was actually meant for. I've never been camping. My parents always said it was a waste of time. But now? Now I get to decide what's worth my time. And camping sounds like a damn good place to start.